Inch a dog, come on. Well, I'll be greased and fried. What in blue blazes is the circus doing up in these parts? Yeah, I love the circus. Come on, maybe we can get us some free passes. Okay, right on now. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 234, and our movie this week is 1988's Killer Klowns From Outer Space, and joining me from the Monster Madness podcast, it's Matt. Matt, how you doing?
I was better before I watched this movie, but how are you?
All right, so Killer Klowns From Outer Space. Now, we kicked around some ideas, and this is the one that we ended up coming up with. You had never seen this before. Tell me,
Correct.
though, what kind of history or knowledge did you have of it prior to watching it for this?
Not really a ton. It's weird. It's one of those movies that people always made out to be like such a great classic movie. You know, so I go down to Chicago a couple times a year for horror conventions, and one of the guys there is always wearing a Killer Klowns shirt one day of the weekend. And then I hear that they're putting out a video game.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I probably should watch this, especially because I'm sure I'll play the game. And then this opportunity came up, and I'm like, I can finally watch it, because I couldn't tell you how many times I was like, today's the day. And then I'd sit down, and I'm like, let's watch literally anything else. And now I know why it was always literally anything else.
That's fair. So I did not see this movie for the first time until in the last couple of years, actually. I had sort of the same thing. You always heard about it. The title tells you what you need to know about this movie, like going into it. But it was one, my younger self was very much of like I'm not going to like that. That's going to be stupid. I'm not going to waste my time on that. As I've gotten older, I've embraced more of sort of schlocky B monster movies. I think also doing the Gore podcast that I co-host, where we do nothing but horror, I have seen some truly, truly bad stuff in that. And something like this, which we covered on that show, I found to be campy and just silly fun. Because I sort of had lowered my expectations enough by this point to just be like, whatever. Like, as long as it's an hour and a half long and can keep my attention, I'll probably enjoy it. And to the credit of the filmmakers, it's an hour and 26 minutes long, and they don't ever take themselves seriously in this movie.
Nope.
And there's definitely a time in my life where I would have absolutely hated that. I appreciate it more now because I sort of get the idea of kind of that John Waters or Trauma Films type idea, where we're just going to take a really insane premise, like napkin idea, write down a title, and then build a movie around that. And that's sort of what it feels like the Chiodo brothers did with this. This came out in 1988, directed by and written by Stephen and Charles Chiodo and Edward Chiodo as well. They're brothers. They're special effects guys. That's what they did prior to this, and this was just them deciding we want to make a movie and going for just the dumbest idea possible. Killer Klowns From Outer Space. And like, I kind of have to give them credit for that. Like, just go for it. They had like a $2 million budget to make this in 1987, 88. And most of that went to production, not special effects. They did a lot of that themselves with the clown costumes and everything. The rest of it was production. There were some things we'll get into and talk about, a couple of like stunts that didn't go quite the way that they wanted them to. But basically, the thing with this movie is it's effectively just a bunch of vignettes very loosely tied together. You find that a lot with comedies. At least I have found that. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Like, a lot of comedies are basically that, because let's face it, if you're writing a script, if you're writing a story, it's hard to come up with like a cohesive story that lasts for an hour and a half. And especially when you're dealing with comedy, it's even harder. And then ending stuff is really difficult. So you just sort of cut and move on to the next thing. And that's kind of what they did here a lot. Was a lot of this movie is just these weird, grotesque clowns harassing a small town's full of people. In a lot of ways.
Yeah, it didn't make much sense. And I guess I want to preface this entire conversation with, if I would have seen this in high school, I probably would have loved this movie. It's the fact that I watched it in 2023 for the first time that I was like, this is not great. But I guess I can see why people like it so much. But to your point is, yes, the story is not great. It's like they had a bunch of scattered ideas that they just kind of like jammed together, and they're like, we have a movie now.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, what I will give them credit for is they also don't try to over-explain it, which I think would be far worse. Like, they just hand wave it away, like sort of the director and the writers kind of knowing, like, look, we know why you're here. You're here because of this title. Here's some clowns. Have fun. Catchy ass song. The theme song is incredibly catchy, and the rest of the music does keep you, at least kept me, at least entertained for the silliness of it all, if nothing else.
Yeah, it aided in the fun of the movie. Like we both said, I mean, it's comedy. It's not meant to be serious. So all they had to do is create 90 minutes of fun. Not even, close to 90 minutes of fun, and it clearly did really well. When the box office was 43 million, and you said the budget was 2, so and they're talking about a sequel. I don't know whatever happened with that, but
they've talked about a sequel for many, many years. I don't know. I think the sequel sort of became the video game that's going to come out next year. I think is when it's going to be released now. So it's really tough to say. This was a strange one in terms of like your main cast are a bunch of kind of not necessarily no names, but nobody that you've really heard of or has done a whole lot of big name stuff. I mean, Grant Kramer, John Nelson, Suzanne Snyder, they're not really known for a whole lot. They worked for a while, a lot of television stuff. I will say the weakest thing in this entire comedy was the forced comic relief of the Terenzi brothers. The guys with the ice cream truck, which was one of my things in one of my notes watching it this time was like, the adult themed ice cream truck and like that idea, while they're getting all hate now or at the time, like that thing would kill right now. Like there are definitely people that would love that in today's kind of world. But those two, it was Michael Siegel and Peter Lacassi. They were a comedy duo, I think in LA, that did like stand-up comedy and kind of comedy shows. They were the weakest part of this, though. They just felt horribly tacked on in every single scene. If you watch any YouTube reviews of this movie, most YouTube reviewers spend half the time just waiting for those two characters to get killed by the clowns. It's like,
I feel like they were.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say, so I feel like they were kind of just there for more comedic relief and for more people to kill. Like take them out of the movie and it takes nothing away other than time. Yeah. So back to the entire concept that we talked about is I think it was just like, well, they probably wrote a movie and they're like, we're about 20 minutes short. Let's make 2 characters, give them something dumb, and then we'll kill them, and there's our time.
In fact, I would also posit, and I bet you anything there was at least one person involved in the making of this that was like a theater kid and wanted those two to be like the minstrels from a Shakespearean play. Like, yeah,
I was gonna say it might be like the Slipknot effect, where like they were friends of friends and they really wanted to be in the band, and they're like, whatever, you can play a tambourine or something. And there you go.
So they're fine. Now I will say that while they annoyed the hell out of me, I absolutely loved 2 characters in this movie, and it's because of the 2 actors that they had for it. First one, we already heard him. It's Farmer Gene Green, is what he's credited as. It's Royal Dano as the old man, the old farmer that goes with his dog and checks out the thing. Now, Royal Dano, by this point, was at the tail end of his career. He only, I think he died just a couple years after this. But he had been in Westerns all the way back into the 40s and 50s and done all sorts of stuff. I remember him from, do you remember the movie House?
Yes. I honestly, it's what's another one I haven't seen, but I've seen the name a bunch. Yeah, I know I haven't seen like a ton of classics, but I've seen Taint, Light, and Slaw.
Oh, well. So House,
Tubi's got some wild movies.
yeah, it does. House was a pretty good movie, but they also made a sequel to it that's virtually unrelated called House 2: The Second Story. And in that, Royal Dano plays a character called Gramps. And it was a movie that I saw as a very young child because it's like a almost PG rated horror movie. Like, it's not a horror movie really at all. It's not scary except for one character. But it was just a movie we happened to have on tape for some reason. I don't even remember how, and I just loved it. And Royal Dano plays the character Gramps, and that movie was one that I just saw so much as a kid. So when I see him and I hear his voice, he's got that kind of voice. And in this, you could tell he was just having fun, like just going crazy. And he had that big old bloodhound, and he's playing that super tropey character of like just the crazy old farmer, whatever, that sees the thing in the sky. But I loved him. And then the other one is also the objectively worst character in this entire movie and the true villain in my mind. And that's Officer Curtis Mooney, played by John Vernon. Because he's just a terrible, he's awful. Like, the town is being overrun by insane alien clowns, and he's refusing to even take phone calls from people. Which I love. Again, it's that trope, but that's John Vernon. Now, he's an actor you recognize. Even if you don't recognize him, you do. You've seen him or heard him in something. Because he has been acting since, God, I want to say the 50s. But he also does a ton of voice work in animation and video games. Do you remember Batman the Animated Series? Did you ever watch that? Like Fox
here and there.
afternoons? He played Rupert Thorne, like the big criminal boss in that. And he was in he did in like the Spider-Man cartoon. He'd show up. He showed up in the Hulk card, like a lot of Marvel and DC cartoons in the 90s. But he also is Dean Wormer from National Lampoon's Animal House, which is possibly the thing he's most known for.
Yep. I see he also was the voice of the prosecutor in Heavy Metal, the original Heavy Metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's wild, the stuff this guy's done.
And he's so good at playing these like uptight villainous characters, the mayor in Dirty Harry, Dean Wormer, those kinds of characters. And so this is like the perfect distillation of all of those into one. Like he's terrible, and you don't feel bad for him at all at any point. And when he dies, it's like, yes, good. He deserves to die. He deserves to. And of course they foreshadow it. I love that. You're not going to turn me into a dummy. It's like, oh yeah, you literally although I will say, so this movie, Killer Klowns from Outer Space, right? It's an 80s horror movie, but it's PG-13. And if you really think about it, there's a lot of killings in it, but most of that is just people getting wrapped up into cotton candy. Like,
yep.
With the exception of the clown that punches the guy's head clean off his shoulders, which I don't know if that inspired Jason Takes Manhattan to do the same gag like a year later, because I think it was right around the same time, or not.
Yeah.
Who knows? But aside from that one, the only other really death that had any blood to it was Officer Mooney. And it was pretty brutal because he's sitting there as the marionette, and then you see the clown like pull his hand out and it's covered in blood, and he shakes it, and you hear like the slap of the blood coming off and hitting the ground. And this watching surprised me a little bit more, because I was like, oh, this is, as horror movies go, it's fairly tame because it's just a lot of like silly clown deaths. And then that one seemed like they wanted to make that a little more visceral. Which again was earned because Mooney was terrible from the get-go. Like the first moment you see him, he's just awful. And I loved it. John Vernon is just so good. He also gets, because it's PG-13, he gets their one F-bomb. And listen, if you're making a movie and it's PG-13 and you get one F-bomb, you give it to John Vernon. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah. There's no better person to do it.
And he delivers it so well. But those two are what make the movie for me. Like the rest of the actors, whatever, take them or leave them. In fact, it's nothing against Grant Kramer as Mike, who, by the way, his full name is credited as Mike Tobacco. I don't know why it's Mike Tobacco.
I saw that. Yeah, like what? Okay, I mean, whatever if that's what you're into,
but like his performance was he felt like he was reading lines all the time. You know, he was very fast with all of his readings and everything. But yeah, just John Vernon and Royal Dano carried this movie for me. Like they make it enjoyable and memorable for me. Them and the clowns.
Yeah. Well, and kind of, I mean, I guess there's a reason that you've never heard of that guy other than this. I mean, obviously the people that we mentioned who've done a bunch of stuff were clearly carrying the movie from the acting perspective. Grant Kramer as Mike Tobacco, a pretty forgettable character and a pretty forgettable actor. So, yeah, naturally, I guess if I was thinking this one through, I would have opened up his Wikipedia page. I mean, he's been in a bunch of stuff, but like An Inconvenient Woman, never heard of that.
Yeah, most of what the main three had been in are either like parts, in an episode of a TV show here or there, or kind of lesser known direct-to-video or B movies. It's a lot of that.
I stand corrected. Mike Kramer was in Willy's Wonderland.
Oh, that's right. See, I didn't love Willy's Wonderland, and so maybe I think I remember seeing him though and thinking, "Oh yeah, I've seen that face before." Willy's Wonderland. I am a Nick Cage super fan, as anyone knows that listens to this show. My problem with Willy's Wonderland was it got a little bit repetitive. It felt like it was 45 minutes worth of an hour and a half long movie. Like I needed just one or two more little story beats instead of.
Well, you're familiar with how that came about, right? I know we're not talking about Willy's Wonderland, but while we're on the topic, so I feel like they had to strip out absolutely everything Five Nights at Freddy's to make it Willy's Wonderland, and that's what you get. You get a movie where Nick Cage has 0 lines, and that was probably my favorite part. Is how you always were waiting for him to talk, and he never did.
Yeah,
and then that was the most memorable part to me is that he says not a word.
It was my thoughts on Willy's Wonderland was I wanted to like it more than I did. Because at some point I just got to a rinse and repeat mentality with it, and I kind of get it, but it's tough. It's tough to do. Like Killer Klowns is an example of the same style of movie that Willy's Wonderland is trying to be as well. It's not easy to make a movie that is kind of a very loose plot. And throwing a bunch of stuff out there and make it something that is memorable. Now, this movie had the help of being an 80s film, and it's coming out in that era of either, like this was around the time, I think the Blob remake was like a year before this or a year after this. Was that 87 or 89? I don't remember, but it was around late 80s. We had The Stuff. We had, all these kind of B movie, either new ones or remakes, and this slotted right in there, it was sort of a prime time for that. And they just took a silly premise and just ran with it. And I forgot to mention one cast member who's only in a couple of shots, but a very young Christopher Titus is in this movie. And I loved him. He's the kid with the glasses at the very beginning of it's drinking the beer brand beer. And then we see him once again up at the top of the world. And then we never see him again. But that was Christopher Titus, which I always get a kick out of. And I forget every single time that it was him. But no, so in terms of like B movies, which is exactly what this is, what kinds of those do those ever work for you? Or is that really not kind of in your wheelhouse?
No, and they definitely do. I mean, so like in high school, so I got in a lot of trouble in high school, so I had to like find different friends. I went to private schools, so it's like you're just born to act out when you go to private schools. Sure. So when I found and I'm still friends with these guys to this day, but they didn't drink and they didn't go out and stuff like that. So what we would do on Friday nights was just go to Family Video and rent horror movies just based on the box. So it's like that's all we did. So like Slumber Party Massacre 2 is probably one of my favorites from doing that. So I have absolutely no issue with B horror movies. Depending on where your line of B is, like D. Snyder's Strangeland is a personal favorite of mine. Okay, because kind of what I was saying with this is, had I seen this when I was in high school, it would probably resonate a lot more, and I would really like it. Strangeland is that movie. It's not a good movie. It the best soundtrack of all time for when that movie came out, but that movie is a stamp in that time in history. It will never ever work. So it's like, I love that movie for that. Corey and I did it on a podcast of terror, and he didn't care for it, but he had never seen it. And I was like, on the whole time, I'm like, this is great. So to your question is, I'm for whatever I like. There's no like, well, I won't watch B horror movies because they're bad or whatever. I just want to be entertained. And nowadays it's easier said than done, just because of the amount of stuff that's out there.
We are really lousy with choice, right? Like, we just have so much at our fingertips to be able to watch at any time. And I think that's where, like, a film like this, when it came out, it did get a theatrical release, didn't do great. And then, but it made itself up in cult status with like home video and sort of word of mouth. It ended up doing okay theatrically, and I think it's been re-released at least once. But it was that time where cult movies could really be born, because you can't force that either. Like, you can try to make a movie that's a cult classic, but it doesn't always work. And in fact, I think more times than not, if you try to make it that, it sort of doesn't work. You have to do something earnestly, but also kind of lean into the ridiculousness. And that's what works here for me, is like, everybody making this movie knew what they were making. From the moment they signed on to make Killer Klowns from Outer Space, they knew what film they were working on. But they don't half-ass it. They don't cheap out on it. They go with the gags. It's sort of the it's like when you work with the Muppets. Like, Michael Caine in The Muppet Christmas Carol works because he is not at all, he is acting as though he is on stage with a bunch of Shakespearean actors and not Muppets. And that's what works there. That's what makes all those scenes work. That's what makes this work, is like John Vernon shows up knowing who Curtis Mooney is as a character and who he's supposed to be, and he just goes for it and just says, all right, give me all the scenery you can. I'm going to chew the shit out of it. And
so do you think, so this came out in a time where slasher movies were coming out like hotcakes. You know what I mean? Like, everyone was making 10 sequels. So to me, it almost feels like they thought that they had $1 billion idea, and they're like, we're going to make 15 of these things. And then they just made one, and it kind of just stopped, which sucks, but
Oh, I'm sure that they thought they could make more of these, and maybe hoped to, but I think that smartly they didn't make this. It doesn't feel, watching it for me now, like they made this with the idea they were going to continue making more of them. They made this and said, all right, if this is going to do great, and then we can continue on. But they put everything into this. So like because those clowns, I have to say, even though there's a couple of shots where you can see like a visible zipper on the back of a clown head or something like that, those clown masks are really good. They're just they're the right mix of kind of creepy, grotesque, but then silly at the same time. And they got a bunch of people. I don't know how many of them were wearing platforms, but they had some really tall people in there. Those clowns were big, and just, it worked. Like, that all looked great. The gags and all the clown stuff, they put a lot of effort into that. And
which, it's funny you mention that, because it was like some of the details, some of the small things that people may not consider were, when you think about it, perfect. It's okay, so a clown from outer space, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to put someone in a cocoon of cotton candy naturally. It's like, you don't just, even the popcorn gun, like nothing. When I thought of Killer Klowns from Outer Space, neither of those two things were what I thought it would go, but it's perfect, and it works really well with this movie.
Yeah. The idea of, their spaceship looks like a big top, and then it's an actual top when it comes out of the ground. But they've got like the clown that makes the balloon animal dog, and then it's like a bloodhound. I thought was cool. So they got like their powers extend to like balloon animals, the cotton candy thing, popping out of pizza boxes, doing the puppets and all of that kind of stuff. Like, there was something they did good. Now these guys were known for, they worked on actually Steven Chiodo was the principal puppeteer for Team America World Police.
Oh wow.
So he'd worked on that. They'd worked on Screamers was one that they did, those little screamer bots, or not bots, the little creatures, whatever they were. Like they did the stop motion stuff there. They had done effects on, let's see, what was something else that they had done?
All of the Critters movies?
Yeah, the critter stuff was all, they created the little critters, all that kind of stuff. So that's what their background was in. And so, like, knowing that, I'm not surprised that the story was pretty loose and pretty simple, because they're not story people, right? They're effects people. Mm-hmm. So they just, Ernest Scared Stupid was another one. That's a favorite of mine from my childhood.
It's such a good movie.
And they actually reused some of these clown masks as trolls in Ernest Scared Stupid. They just repainted them.
Really?
So, which kind of explains why those trolls in that movie scared the crap out of me as a kid, because they were rough to watch, like rough to see at that age. But
oh wow, sorry, they worked on UHF, which is another personal favorite of mine.
Oh, great movie!
Wow.
Great movie.
It's incredible.
Now, originally the Clownzilla, the big clown at the end, was going to be stop motion, but they just couldn't make it look right. They couldn't get they didn't have enough time, enough budget to make it right. So that's why they ended up just doing a suit and having a miniature truck. I think that worked better, personally. I like the look of it.
I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because you can, if you want to nitpick through, you can start to see the low budget in that third act, because everything is just like black backgrounds. And you can tell they're like, oh, we've got a sound stage. We can dress part of it and use that, and then just use the same stage and redress it. But, because they're inside a spaceship, they can get away with that too. So it's like,
yep.
That's some of that B movie stuff that just, it shouldn't work. It should annoy me as a film person, but it doesn't. I'm like, nah, it's cool. Whatever. You're making a movie using spit and duct tape. Like, that's all you got. It's that kind of Roger Corman filmmaking of like, what's the cheapest and fastest we can do this?
Well, and I think there's two ways you can look at it in terms of someone who likes movies, and I'll equate it to music. It's like there are people who just like music to like music. Mm-hmm. Then there are people who pick it apart. It's the same with movies. You can like movies to like movies, or you're going to pick them apart for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So I'm the same with you. Is like, I just want to enjoy it. I don't really. It's something I've always complained about is like, I don't necessarily enjoy being spoon-fed, like directly, but I don't want to have to spend a ton of time thinking. Like, I think 40 hours a week, when I watch a movie, I just want to be entertained. And that's like, I just recently, someone explained to me what Donnie Darko was about. And like, I rewatched it because it had been a really long time. I watched like YouTube explanations because I'm a dumb idiot. And I'm like, I don't really know what the hell's going on. And she goes, well, it's astral projection. I'm like, okay, like I that's thanks, but that's not really what I wanted. So I'm on your side. Like, just, I don't care if it's cheap. I don't care if you reuse stuff. I don't care if I see zippers. Like, just entertain me.
Well, and it's funny because it really, for me, it's a total mood dependent thing. Like a couple of weeks ago, I watched Annihilation for the first time with Natalie Portman, and that is a movie that does not spoon feed you anything, and it makes you ask a whole bunch of questions and then says, nope, we're not going to answer any of those. We're just going to, here's some weird stuff. Enjoy. That's how I feel every time I watch something directed by David Lynch. Like, it's, and Lynch will do that. I've said this a few times. People are probably tired of me talking about it, but they had on The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob this past season, he had Phil Tippett on talking about his movie Mad God. And Joe Bob asked him, well, what's this movie about? And Phil looked at him and said, oh, it's about 85 minutes. And like, it was a great response, because watching that movie, I still have no idea what the hell that movie was about. Like, it was just insane. And I'm fine with stuff like that too. Like, I love that kind of just weird art for art's sake. But I also can then turn around and watch this and just be like, nah, just give me something dumb and fun. Like, give me a dumb action movie. Let me watch Jackie Chan for an hour and a half, jump across an alleyway, scale a building, and like, drive a car like nobody should be able to, because it's just fun stunt work. Like I like all of that.
So I think there's merit in both. So like so I play in a band. I don't write the vocals, but I pay attention to him because it's whatever. Our vocalist is an English major, and he goes, people are always like, what is this about? And he goes, all I ever do is just say, what does it mean to you?
Yeah.
Because I think it's easier to connect with your audience if you leave it up to them to decide or to determine what it means.
Yes.
And then you just like, there you go. That's exactly what you're going for. So I appreciate that, but as a human being, I like to know what it is supposed to be about, not what I'm interpreting it to be about. So I guess in terms of Annihilation, which I've never seen and I have no interest in seeing, although now that we've talked about it, I may go watch it. I guess I would be curious to see how I can correlate it to myself as opposed to what the writers were trying to get across.
Yeah, and I think like stuff like that, it just depends sort of on where you are when you see the thing. Like you've said a couple of times now, if you had seen this in high school, you'd probably have loved it, and it would be completely different than it is now, because you are not the same person you were in high school. You've got all sorts of different experiences and baggage and all of that. It's kind of like see a movie and when I was younger that I didn't like. My example is Event Horizon. I went and saw Event Horizon in the theater. Was not prepared for what that movie was. Didn't like it. Came away with just a bad view of that movie. Watched it again a couple of years later. I had changed a little bit of what I thought about movies because, that movie came out when I was 16, 17, and now I was 19, 20. Watching it again, and in a different headspace, I was a different person, and suddenly I really liked it because I had changed over those couple of years, and I've done that with a few movies. And there's some that I've watched, and I go back and I watch them now, and I'm like, okay, I understand why I liked that as a kid, but it didn't grow with me in the same way.
I think that's the beauty of media as a whole is you see something when you're younger, whether you like it or not, you can revisit it. With life experiences as your kind of your lens, you can take more out of it, and you either love it for nostalgia or you love it because you understand it better or whatever. But I do believe that is probably why I spend so much time watching movies and TV and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the beauty of everything. Music too. Yeah.
Music is the big one for me. Like I listen to, because music is one of those things for most people. And I take a lot of musicians out of this because you have a different mentality when it comes to it in a lot of ways. It's just a different thing. Oh, yeah. But like for your typical person, you sort of listen to music and you reach a certain point and you stop going after new stuff and you just listen to the same music over and over. And that's why you've got these radio stations, like there's radio stations around me here that still play the same songs they were playing 30 and 40 years ago. It's just the same rotation of music because that's all these, certain people that listen to it want to hear. And it's
called the oldies station.
Yeah, although they don't call them oldies anymore. It's classic rock now.
Shut up.
I know.
I think I saw something like I was turned on the classic rock station. They played Blink-182, and I'm like, oh no.
Oh, there was a great thing I read. Somebody was talking about they were aiming this at authors and saying, look, your 22-year-old protagonist does not. They view Blink-182 as a classic rock band. Okay. They named all this stuff, and I was just like, I was targeted by all of it and just getting hit left and right. And like, okay, yes, I'm old. I get it. But like for me, music is one of those things. I go back and I do listen to a lot of music I listened to in high school still, but some of it that I used to listen to, I listen to now. And I'm like, why did I enjoy this? This is not like, it's objectively not that great. Whereas it like musically, it just doesn't hold up like it did. And other stuff where from the same era I listened to, I'm like, how did I not start listening to this earlier in my life? Like, it's even better the more I hear it. And so that's my thing. I'm with you with media. Like, I just love consuming it because there's so much to be taken from it. Something as simple as a dumb idea like Killer Klowns from Outer Space. We're going to make a movie about a bunch of circus clown aliens. We're not even going to explain why they're here. I did like in the movie that scene, though, where they're talking about the reasons and they're all coming up with their, like, the one guy's like, maybe this is why we have clowns in the first place and why some people are scared of them. And the other guy's like, maybe they were just cruising around and wanted a bite to eat. Who knows? I kind of, the movie was self-aware enough to give you that too. But I think that that's one of the beauties of media, is all the different forms that it can take and how it can be something to everyone. Well, with the exception of The Room. I don't like that movie at all.
I have never seen it, but I did see what was the documentary about him?
Disaster Artist.
Disaster Artist, yeah. And that was enough for me. Like, I get the jokes, I get the memes. I don't ever need to see that movie. I don't understand. That's like, have you seen Manos in the Hands of Fate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely atrocious.
Terrible movie.
But it has such a cult following that there's someone made a video game that's on Steam. There was a Kickstarter for a sequel. It's like everything has a place. Just because I hate it doesn't mean you hate it. And that's just the beauty of everything. As long as you can have an open mind, you may find something you like about it.
Look, if somebody, for those that really love The Room and go to the midnight showings, because that's where I saw it, was at like one of those late night showings with people throwing spoons, and it was a very Rocky Horror Picture Show environment for that movie. Still didn't like the movie. So, but Rocky Horror Picture Show, love that. I don't know why. I don't know why that one works for me and The Room doesn't, but certain things just connect with you. And that's the beauty of it, is I won't ever talk down or like put down somebody who likes a thing because it connected with them in some way. As long as it's not
like
harmful. Okay. I mean, there are certain lines we can't cross.
Touche.
And as long as it's not harmful to other people as well. Like that's a whole different argument.
Right. And you're making a very great point before I jammed a not great joke in there, but there's, my mom always told me there's a lid for every pot.
Mm-hmm.
So like legitimately there is something for everyone. And I guess my main complaint is not that Nickelback is a band. It's that there's a market for Nickelback and that there's a large enough market that they're still selling. I think they just recently sold out the amphitheater in Milwaukee and it was like 18,000 people.
Oh yeah.
Like good for them. I wish I was doing that. I can't get 7 people to come see us.
What was growing up? So my high school cross country team, we had one of the guys my freshman year, one of the upperclassmen had an album. It was Sugar Ray's Lemonade and Brownies, and we used a song off of that was our team anthem. It was Mean Machine. It was our team anthem, right? That was a song we would play. That one of the guys would play it before every race to get everybody hyped up. And I love that album. And their second album came out. I loved the second album, but it also had the song Fly on there, which became a super mega ultra hit. And by their third album, everything was more like Fly and less like Mean Machine. And I remember seeing an interview with Mark McGrath talking about that. And say what you want about Mark McGrath, but I will respect him for this, which was people said we sold out. Yeah, we did sell out. For a whole lot of money. And it's like, hey, that's what you want out of it. Go for it, dude. Like, more power to you. You are getting out of it what you want.
I recently saw something and it was they were talking to John Popper and I can't recall, I'm not a big Blues Traveler fan, but the name of the song that made them what they are. And he said, I don't care who you are, but he goes, you come up to me on the street with a harmonica and say, play that song. He goes, I'm going to play that song. And I'm going to play that song like it's the first time I've ever played it. He goes, because that pays all of my bills.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, another argument is I don't care for the band Disturbed, but if they were like, hey, do you want to quit your job, make way more money and play drums in this band? I would leave everything in a heartbeat. Like, absolutely. Like, I would love that. So everyone has a price. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, sure. I always bring up the Michael Caine line. I've never seen Jaws: The Revenge, but I do very much enjoy the house that it helped me buy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's good for them. And I mean, that's sort of the balance, right? It's you want to do the art, and there are some artists who do sort of embrace the starving artist and like turn things down, but they're very rare. There are some people that get into it as I just want to make money business. Yep. There's a nice crossover of most artists I have found really do want to make art, but they also want to, eat and maybe have a house or at least a roof. So it's that balancing thing that you do. And
Right.
And so I never begrudge an actor for being in a bad movie because they got paid for it, whatever it was. Either they got paid for it or they took a role because they wanted to work with this specific person. That's another one. Like, it'll happen. Even if you're not a Wes Anderson fan, although I am, I love his movies just because there's something very distinct about them. But there's also actors that take a pay cut to work with him, but then they'll turn around and do a big budget thing, or they may not love doing a Marvel movie, but they'll take a role in a Marvel movie because it pays them well. And I'm fine with stuff like that. Like, you gotta balance those things out. So then you can do your passion projects like the Chiodo brothers getting to make this movie. And, I'm sure it was a big thrill for them to get to work with guys like John Vernon and Royal Dano, because you got to feel like those were names that they just loved. And I'm kind of surprised, honestly, that the Chiodos haven't done more than they did. Like, they did a lot of creature effect stuff, as I mentioned and we talked about, but like more films that they were sort of directing or producing, they didn't really like. Chiodos produced a few, nothing you've ever heard of, but they did work on Freaked. I don't know if you ever saw that with Alex Winter. I just saw that for the first time. That's a weird movie.
Never mind. I think Corey and I did it on podcast here. He turns into a spider or something weird.
Yeah, he turns
into something.
Yeah. It's got Randy Quaid in it. But like a lot of the stuff that Chiodo has produced, or the Chiodo brothers have produced, has been, a lot of these like low budget schlocky things. I do hope at some point maybe they'll get to do. There was talk they wanted to do a sequel movie trilogy and like a series. I don't know how much you could do in a series on this kind of stuff. It's like, this doesn't feel like an idea that has a lot of legs to it to me. The Killer Klowns idea. I feel like it feels like a limited thing because that joke is only going to take you so far.
Right.
But I do think a newer movie wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because we're sort of in an age of movies too that can be self-referential and like this movie is, without going too far. I don't know. You got to have the right people in it too, because I think about some of those, disaster movie, epic movie type parody things that wanted to be what Airplane was.
Yep. And
they failed miserably because they didn't get what made Airplane work. That's the thing you worry about if anybody does a remake. Even the people that made the first one doing something like Killer Klowns is not realizing the thing that made Killer Klowns the cult classic that it is, and learning the wrong lessons.
I also believe that now when something gets made, there's a lot of hands that are involved and a lot of money that's involved, and you generally have to do what the money tells you to do.
Yeah.
So as much as everyone thinks that a sequel would be great, maybe if you crowdfund it, you could do exactly what you wanted to do, but you get a studio involved and someone with deep pockets shows up and you're going to end up making a movie they want, or they're going to cut things out that they don't want, or whatever. But I think you could do a prequel per se, the clowns, where their home planet, where they came from, how did they get here?
Yeah.
If we care about that, we spoon feed a lot now. Consider when we were kids, you played a Nintendo game, there were no instructions, there was no tutorials. You sat down and you figured it out. Now there's an hour explaining what every button does and making sure that you're okay to play this game. So I think that, a prequel or a backstory or something, or to that effect, could be a good way to kickstart this again. But you could also take them to a different area of the planet and interact with those people or something. So I think there's a ton, or a different planet entirely. It doesn't have to be on Earth. They end up on Mars and whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that there is room to kind of grow the story, but can it be done right, and can it be done well is kind of the bigger question.
Yeah, and I mean, I would hope so, but who knows? And there was even studio interference on this movie, believe it or not.
Go figure.
And it's the dumbest thing too. So Do you remember the scene where the clowns pull up at the amusement park and there's the lone security guard at the amusement park?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he gets the pies to the face and they melt him. So the Chiodos wanted to get Soupy Sales to be the security guard because that's what Soupy Sales was famous for, was taking a pie to the face. And the money people were like, nobody's going to know who Soupy Sales is. No, just have whoever do that. And, you know, I get it from their standpoint. Like even in 1988, nobody knew who Soupy Sales was. Like nobody remembered him. I don't know how it is that I even know who that is, but like I did.
I was impressed.
But it's one of those where, in retrospect, thinking about it, that would be such a funny moment to see. But it would be funny for the 5 people that know who that is. They would be the Leo DiCaprio pointing at the screen saying, "Oh, it's Soupy Sales." Nobody else does,
right.
And they've had to pay for that. So even a small budget movie like this gets that kind of interference from the money people occasionally. There was also the original opening was going to be the scene with the guy driving the car, and then the clown comes up alongside him and runs him off the road. That was supposed to be the original opening, and that was the character that Mike talks about finding in the whatever, I can't remember his name now, whatever guy name that he said was in the cotton candy, and he says his name over and over like it's important. That's who that was supposed to be, but they ended up changing things up and deciding to just open with a opening credit shot the way that they did it. And so they took that scene that they had shot, put it in the middle of the movie, and just made it random person getting run off the road. So there were a couple of different cuts of this movie where they kind of moved things around a little bit.
I think it would be really odd to start the movie that way unless they would have reorganized everything because of, after the credit scene where, the farmer and his dog, or you see the ship land or whatever, and then they find it in the woods. So it's like, so how would you make sense of that if they're already on the planet, but then you see them show up? But whatever, that's getting nitpicky. So I think the decision that they made to move it was probably the right one.
Yeah, I think in the end, like the way that everything flows together, it works a lot better. For sure. Yeah. I also love, there's a famous gaffe in this when Royal Dano goes into his house to get like his bucket or his whatever and comes back out after seeing the thing crash. If you're looking in the background, you can see the prop master like standing in the house and slowly backing up to get out of frame. Like he's backing up into the shadow. So if you ever do watch it again, pay attention to that. You can see him through the screen of the door. You can just see a dude standing there like slowly backing up because they're like, "Oh shoot, you're in the frame, dude." I love stuff like that, like little things like that. It was like watching it this time. I noticed when the little clown comes up to the bikers, when he turns around, you just see the zipper going all the way up the back of the mask, like just blatantly there. I was like, "Oh, I never noticed that before." Maybe because it's high def now, that helps. Like
that's possible.
Old VHS, you're not going to notice that because it's just not high enough. It's not good enough fidelity.
So now you got to go back and watch it on VHS to see if you can see the zipper.
Yeah, that's true. I know somebody who's got a lot of VHS stuff. I could probably get him to get me one.
Oddly,
of those.
So do I.
Do
you know if there's a VHS festival in, I think it's Pennsylvania?
Doesn't surprise me. VHS and like old sort of 80s, 90s era tech is really getting popular. I know a few people that like collect CRTs now, and for a while like you couldn't give those things away.
Right. I stumbled on an Instagram page that's just, I think it's called like 1980s computer. And it was like, the reel I saw was the person loading Doom off of a DOS prompt and running the game. And like, I remember like, that's how I started learning computers, was on DOS prompts and command prompt and stuff. So like, it's nostalgic to us, but
sure,
kids don't understand. Like if you go to your friend's house, we used to have LAN parties back in the day and you're carrying around a 50-pound monitor. A huge computer and all that stuff. Like, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, having to go in and mess with your IRQ and DMA settings so you could get the sound right when you were playing Wolfenstein 3D. Oh
yeah. I remember, this will date me a little bit, but King's Quest V
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever played the Sierra games, but my dad was irate that he had to purchase a mouse because you couldn't. It was like a grid snap cursor. So if you use the arrows, you can move around, but you couldn't get it to land on the first item you needed to get in the game.
No.
So he was like, "I gotta buy a mouse." I'm like, yeah, well,
I remember the Sierra
get
games.
used to
I played more LucasArts adventure games than the Sierra ones because I wasn't very good.
Fair enough.
And the LucasArts games outside of Maniac Mansion didn't usually kill you, but the Sierra games
that's true.
were brutal.
Yeah, we had Space Quest, King's Quest, Police Quest. Like I still go back and play those once in a while. And legitimately, I owe everything in my ability to type to Sierra games because it was all time sensitive.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you had to be able to type quick. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, but that was the era. Like, and that's another thing I think for Killer Klowns is a movie that I appreciate when having only seen it for the first time is the amount of effort and time that went into the visual effects that they used, because it's either they're making masks, they're doing things practically, or they're doing like cell animation, Ghostbusters style over top of the film frame for like the cotton candy gun or the balloon.
okay.
Like those transitions are that kind of cell frame animation over top of film that you would do because there weren't computers to really. They certainly didn't have the budget to be working with whatever limited computers were available. Like this, ILM isn't working on Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Certainly not in 1987. But I appreciate stuff like that because while some of it hasn't aged that well, again, I come back to those clowns still creepy looking and they work. I think
for
too,
sure. Yeah.
Obviously the fear of clowns is a real thing. So I'm sure that helped them out a lot. That's the other reason why I think right now is a great time to do a follow-up to that is we've had so much in the way of clown horror movies over the last number of years. Like the last, I would say 10 to 12 years have been, maybe even longer than that probably, but a lot of, your Terrifiers and Clown and all these other ones kind of going with that idea. And it's not like it's a new thing, but it just feels like that kind of a, sort of like Sharks had for a good period of time. A lot of shark horror movies. We had a lot of clown horror movies. And I would much rather see a sequel or something from Killer Klowns from Outer Space than another Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey. Like,
I'm sure you're aware, but they're making another one.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
They're
before the turd even came out, they made another one.
They're also making a Mary Had a Little Lamb horror.
Did you hear about the Wizard of Oz one?
Gale?
Yeah. I'm actually really excited about that.
That one looks interesting because, like, Wizard of Oz is kind of creepy anyway, and especially Return to Oz is nightmare fuel. We talked about that recently on Gore because we watched the trailer for Gale, and I'm curious because I like the idea of. It seems like it's diving in. There's a lot of psychological stuff going on with the Wizard of Oz in general, so it's kind of ripe territory for that.
Yeah, so I guess on the topic of all these horror movies based on children's stories when we were kids is like we now live in a world where no one has new ideas. Like my wife and I watched Talk to Me last week, like right when it came out on digital. And both of us were like, that is the first new concept of a horror movie that we have seen in 20 years, 15, 20 years, easily. And like that's why I liked it so much because it was finally something new. We're either remaking, we're making sequels, we're, revisiting, just rehashing old ideas. Like Smile is It Follows with a different gesture. That's it. Like, it's just, it sucks. And I get it. Like, people, people are pumping out more and more content quicker and quicker than before. So there's like this need to just get it out. But also, like, you spin out. Sorry. I know you just swatted at a fly, and I know that life, so that's what made me laugh. But it's like I wish we would I would rather not have 700 movies a year and get 100 good ones. But that's not how you make a ton of money.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because like, how many variations on the same story can you tell? But at the same time, I also am fascinated sometimes by finding a well-known story and visiting it from a different lens.
I
You
will
know,
agree with
like
that.
like I love one of the reasons that I enjoy the 13th Warrior as a movie and also the book Eaters of the Dead is it's Beowulf, but it was Beowulf through a different lens. There was one that was great. It was a lesser known. It was a Dino De Laurentiis production from like 2006. It's got Colin Firth in it. It's called shoot, what is it called? It's not The Last Dragon. The Last Legion. That's what it is. But it's a version of sort of a precursor to the Arthurian legend, but it's told through the eyes of the last Roman emperor fleeing to Britannia. And so it was this really cool concept of a story that you know already, or at least you know parts of it already. And it's as the movie is unfolding, you start to figure out like, oh, I know where this is going. Like that kind of stuff can be interesting, but you're right. How many times can you tell the same sort of It Follows type of thing? And that's another thing is there's a fine line between imitation is the sincerest form and just jumping on a bandwagon.
I'd say being lazy.
You know, Halloween
have you seen
great.
Brightburn?
I haven't yet, and that one is one I kind of I was interested to see.
And that's kind of on the same vein of the topic. You know, it's obviously for anyone that's listening that isn't aware, it's Superman as a child, but it's a horror movie. Like he is evil, he is not good. I thought it was great, even though it's Superman. You know,
Yeah.
I guess they announced that I think they're trying to make a sequel. Or they're going to be making a sequel. I was pretty excited about that, but highly recommend that one.
Comics have gotten to do that a little bit over the years, usually in sort of DC's Elseworld, Marvel's What If type stuff is where it gets fascinating with like stuff like Superman Red Sun, for instance, is a cool idea for a book. Like, well, what happened if Superman landed somewhere else? You know, it's a totally different series of events would unfurl. So I like that kind of stuff. It's just I'm more like I don't mind retelling certain stories as long as there's a reason to do it. But it's like Halloween comes out. Halloween shows you can, in 1978, shows you can make a lower budget slasher film, very scary one with very little blood in it. But people didn't learn the right lessons for it. Instead, you just churn out a bunch of crap after that. And yes, there's some good stuff that came after it too, but like Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th was famously like the producer saying, "Hey, Halloween did great. Let's make that." And but they did at least something a little bit different with it and tried to go in a new direction. Whereas there were other filmmakers that were just like, "No, we're just going to remake the same damn thing." And that happens more and more. You know, it's hard. It's hard to do because sometimes even you can think you've got like kind of a cool idea, and then you may even realize partway through, oh, I'm just making someone else this movie over again, or it becomes that other thing too. I mean, you got to wonder how many times that happens, where somebody decides
and
they start with a great idea and it just gets taken away from them, or it devolves into whatever it becomes.
Right, and I guess I don't want to like completely poo-poo on anyone that's ever tried to write anything that turned out to be something similar, because I do believe that maybe the intention was not to mimic a story. It just that's what was at the top of your head. You know, I remember in a band in high school, we were writing a song and wrote the whole thing, and someone comes in and goes, "You realize that's just the riff to Detroit Rock City that you're doing right there, like just in a different scale or whatever." And we're all like, "Shit, he's right." No intent of doing that. It just happens. So I think that could be a lot of what is going on when you have like your It Follows in your smile and stuff like that. But it's always really easy to sit on this side and say what we're saying when you're not trying to write a movie. So I don't want to sound like I'm being hypercritical, and I'm by no means speaking for Travis when I say any of that. But I couldn't do it. I'm just on the ingestion side of the media. So
sure,
keep making great stuff, guys.
And the thing about it is that while we have so many choices now, and you can sometimes get that choice paralysis, you don't know what to watch, then you get that Talk to Me that shows up. That is, I mean, the story of that is crazy because those guys were YouTube people. They were YouTube creators, and they worked on a bunch of stuff, and eventually were able to make this little movie, hit some, the festivals with it in Australia, and get it picked up, and it blows up. And that, I saw that and I was blown away by it. Like, it was really good. But they started out on YouTube, just creating. So it's kind of like with music, is the same thing, right? There's a whole lot of bands that a style gets popular, a bunch of bands show up that are doing the same thing. Some of them had been doing it for a while before that, get lost in the shuffle. Some of them can evolve beyond it, and some just sort of do it once or twice, and then they fade away. And it's like anything. Authors do, books. It all goes in cycles, right? Like right now, I've noticed musically, nu metal becoming somewhat popular again, and it wasn't for the longest time. And I like that because there's a lot of stuff. For me, it's a lot of nostalgia, but there's a lot of stuff that I listen to, and I'm discovering some of the bands from that era that I just never caught on with, and some of the newer bands that are doing similar things, or seeing how a band that could start off in that scene, although they're not really part of it, as like the Deftones, and how they evolved over the years and became something completely different. Stone Temple Pilots was like that 10 years or 5 years earlier with the grunge movement. Yep. They were lumped in with all the grunge bands, but they weren't a grunge band, and they became something different. So you're sort of seeing the same thing with like films and television, where something like Stranger Things comes along, right? And it hits that perfect note of like plucking the strings of nostalgia, but doing it in a way that makes sense and kind of works. And then we saw this big wave of 80s themed everything coming off of that because of how popular Stranger Things was. Some of it was okay. Some of it was incredibly derivative. But as that has settled down, we're seeing it kind of wash and come out, and we're seeing some of the creators that were inside that wave going on and doing new things. And that's the stuff that I like to see.
Yeah, and kind of like you'd mentioned, that the people that did talk to me with YouTube, and we now have the ability for anyone to get whatever they want out to the masses quickly. And that's the same like back in the day. Being in a band, is if you didn't have a record deal, your stuff didn't get anywhere. You were hawking out of your trunk. Well, now we have YouTube and self-publishing and Spotify, and but it all adds to, there's just too much. You spend half your time sifting through something to find something decent. By that time, I'm tired. Like it's probably 9:15 and I want to go to bed. Yeah. So it kind of sucks. And I think that's why we revisit these older things. We either, I watched this for the first time because I've heard the name, for 20, 30 years or whatever it's been.
Sure.
And that's probably why you go back to the bands. And same with me, is like, it's just easier to go back to what I know. Why do you rewatch The Office all the time? Because you know what you're getting. It's easier to just know what you're getting than try something new when there's just too much.
Yeah. And this show has helped me break that cycle some. I still go back and revisit things all the time. I'm at some point, probably in the next year or so, I'm going to do another watch through of Psych, because I love that show, and it's like a warm blanket for me. But doing this show has been great for me to break that cycle occasionally and get into, like, I saw a movie that, and this one I bring up a lot, so apologies to longtime listeners that are tired of me mentioning this movie, but Fish Story is a Japanese film. My buddy Miles raved about it, so he made me watch it. I sat down, I watched it. I had no idea what it was going in. Here's the elevator pitch for that movie. A punk rock group in 1970s in Japan write a song that one day saves Earth from an asteroid. It doesn't make any sense at all. Watch the movie, it's not going to make any sense at all. But there was something about it that I just loved. And it had one of the most punk rock moments of a punk rock band in a film I've ever seen. Like, it was just, there's a moment in that movie that feels like the essence of punk rock to me, from these guys in the scene, and they're just sitting around smoking and eating some noodles. But it was something that I had no expectations going into. I never, ever I had never even heard of this movie, let alone thought about watching it. But because I do this show, somebody's like, you got to see this movie. Sure, let's do it. I check it out, and now it's like I can't stop listening to the song from it, and I love it. And I do think I'm with you. It's very easy and comforting to go back to things we know. And when you're surrounded with, you turn on Netflix and it's like, well, I can scroll through Netflix for an hour and a half, by which time I could have finished a movie. And then you end up either not watching something or you just go back to something you've seen 10 times. It's an easy thing to do. I try to force myself every once in a while because I think it's good for us to step out of a comfort zone. Don't do it all the time though. Like, don't make yourself do it constantly because it's going to become too difficult, but it's a balance thing. Balance out watching something that you know and that you like, and take a try every once in a while. That's what going to the theater is like for me. And I think why I like it so much still is, for me growing up, that was like, oh, this new thing. I know very little about it. I've seen a couple of trailers for it, on TV, or I saw a trailer for it the last movie I was in, and I want to go check it out. And I may or may not like it. Who knows? That for me, that I still get that feeling when I go see something in a theater. So, obviously, your mileage may vary.
Yeah. I always get screwed at theaters because I end up sitting next to someone that I just wish would bury their face in a pillow. It's
tough. Like I went this past Friday and I saw A Haunting in Venice. And
okay. How was it?
I enjoyed it.
I guess real quick. Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a murder mystery. So like, you've already got me at, it's based on an Agatha Christie and it's Poirot and all that fun stuff. But I enjoyed it. And it was, as a theater experience, it was great because it was quiet. There weren't a lot of people there. So I could really focus on the movie. I didn't have any distractions. But the bummer of it was opening night at a 7 p.m. showing and there were 20 people there. So it's like, oof, that's not great for the movie itself. No. So it's that double-edged sword. Like, I like going into the theater experience, and I have been very lucky in that most of my experiences have not been terrible. But yeah, like, other people can ruin that for you. So I know that's very much a your mileage may vary thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the last time we went to a movie, we specifically went at like 11 a.m. on a Wednesday when we both took a week off of work.
Yeah.
Because it was literally us and 2 other people. Mm-hmm. Don't even remember the movie, but I was like, I finally get to enjoy it. Because we went and saw The Nun opening weekend, and the lady next to me was like sniffling and coughing and talking the whole time. And yeah. I was about to say something, but that's like where we live near Green Bay, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. So my wife's a huge Packer fan. So like once a year I have to take her to a football game, and she just goes, I will not let you go to a Bears game because you won't be able to keep your mouth shut when people are around. So it's like, I get to a point, like I have a threshold, and then all bets are off. So that's just why it's easier to stay home. I'd rather stay home and enjoy it with, my dogs and stuff on my couch than other people.
Yeah, no. And I totally get that too. Like, we have created, and technology has brought the home viewing experience so much closer to a theater experience now that it is nice.
Yeah.
I still hold, like, there's a nostalgia factor. I'm sure if my last couple of trips to the theater had been awful, I would start swearing off going to the theater at all, but they've been good enough. I can also go at like a Saturday at 11 o'clock or do that, take a half day off of work and go to a 2 p.m. showing on a Thursday.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of audio clips I got to play of Killer Klowns before we go, because these are too good not to. I kind of want a dog and name him Pooh Bear, just because I'd forgotten that was the dog's name, and I just loved. Again, it's Royal Dano, and he just says
Pooh Bear,
and I was like, Pooh Bear? Who names their dog Pooh? Okay, but then when he gets upset,
where's my Pooh Bear?
Yep. Followed by one of the greater screams of pain that you'll ever hear when he grabs that wire. I mean, this is some good work by, I don't know how much is Royal Dano in his 80s and how much is like augmented, but that's really good. That was,
yeah. I mean, I got to Google if there were any effects on that voice or not.
I don't know, but that's some good stuff there. This one just got me because this felt like it was bordering on an Abbott and Costello routine. When Mike and Debbie are trying to talk to Dave about what happened, like the first time when they just pull up on the curb and like run into the back of the squad car and get out and start talking to Dave, and they mention the cocoons, and there's this exchange, and it just cracked me up.
Cocoons! Cocoons. Yes, cocoons!
Cocoons!
All right, everybody calm down.
It's like, thanks, Debbie. That helped a whole lot. Cocoons. They'd already said it 3 times. You're not helping.
In case you missed it the first 2.
Yeah. And then finally, I just got a couple of, John Vernon that you can't not capture him. There's something about this insult, I think, because it's not an insult I've ever heard someone call someone else, that it made it sound even worse. When he looks at Mike and he recognizes who Mike is, and he goes,
I know you, you little fart.
You little fart. And I was like, boy, that's harsh.
I feel like calling someone a fart, like I'm trying to bring back the term dork.
Yeah.
Like in recent road rage, whatever. People do something dumb and it upsets me while I'm driving. I've gotten away from like yelling, the F word at them or just like saying anything and just go, you dork.
Yeah.
And then they just look so confused that I win. It's the same as like if someone cuts you off, you don't give them the finger. You either give them a thumbs up or you just start clapping.
Yep.
Because then they're confused and angry.
Yeah.
And then I've won once again.
And then you can just drive away and then no harm.
Yep. Yep.
I also loved this when the clown walks in to the station, and there's old Officer Mooney sitting there, and that clown walks in, and his reaction is perfect, because honestly, how else are you going to react when like a 7-foot thing walks into your police station? It's just
Whoop the goddamn to do. What do we have here?
whoop the goddamn to do. So I just isolated that part, and I'm putting it on my soundboard.
Whoop the
Good.
goddamn to do.
And
It's the do that does it for me.
It's the do. Yeah, it's that extra half a syllable. And finally, I always love when a movie drops its title in the middle of it, because you get that wonderful roll credits moment. And this is who better than John Vernon.
Killer clowns from outer space. Holy shit.
No notes. Cut, print, that's a wrap. John, you're great.
Yep.
We miss you. It's perfect. Oh, I mean, I will say this. Killer Klowns from Outer Space is not the type of movie you just sit down to watch to like, unless I have a lot more fun with this movie if I can sit down and watch it with some friends. It's one of those kind of, it's that party movie. It's that movie you put on, you're like, we're just going to watch something, have a few drinks and watch something really dumb because none of us want to think. And it's perfect for that.
Yeah. I don't recommend it at 8 a.m. on a Sunday when you're hungover. As how I watched it today. So
no, in terms of like situations where this movie works, that's very low on the list.
it was pretty bad. Yeah.
But I'm glad you got to see it. So you can tick it off
Yeah, me
your
too.
list, and people, you can tell people, no, I've seen Killer Clowns. I don't need, whether or not you're ever going to watch it again is to be determined. But either way, you're welcome.
Thank you very
for finally
much.
making you do that. Because I do think like movies like this exist for a reason, and I think that they are a lot of fun, and that's really what it comes down to. It's just a fun, dumb, fun movie. We need more stuff like that to exist.
I agree. It like you said, a bunch of friends on a Friday night, get a case of beer or whatever, and just sit around and enjoy how bad it is, and that's what makes it good.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen Wolf Cop?
No, I have not.
Oh boy!
But
Wolf Cop 2 and Wolf Cop and Wolf Cop 2 are they're up there, but they're both movies that I watched with friends with beer and just had a great time because they're not meant to be anything other than that. So there's a time and a place for those movies, and
oh, for sure,
God bless them.
And I do want to say that while I have talked glowingly a lot about Killer Klowns from Outer Space, it is not a good movie. Like from the technical aspects of filmmaking and storytelling, it's not good, but it is enjoyable. So there is that for it.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it wasn't made to be serious. No one made this movie and were like, this is a serious movie about killer clowns from outer space with a popcorn gun.
Yeah.
It was always meant to be tongue-in-cheek, and it was always meant to be fun, and it did exactly what it meant to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for being on the show. And this was, I have to thank Corey again for connecting us, because that was great. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times Corey, who he's been on this show once before, Corey Scott. He's coming back too. I made him watch 13th Warrior. I think that's partly why that was on my brain, was I got him to watch that, and he had a good time with it. But you guys did a show, and you mentioned something about that might be coming back.
Yeah, so, Corey and I did Podcast of Terror for a number of years. It was on Galactic Netcasts, and then it was the Galactic Network. We took kind of a break there. So we were dumb when we started doing it, and we're like, every week we're doing one. Every Sunday night we're recording, and then it got to be a lot. And then we started to understand the merit in seasons. So we kind of took a hiatus, and I focused on Monster Madness, like you had mentioned, and with just changes in life, I was like, hey man, let's bring it back. So we're rebranding it as Revenge of the Podcast of Terror, or Revenge of the Pot. And then we're going to be doing it on the Monster Madness Twitch channel. We're going to start recording when we do that. No weekly, no nothing. Just when we do them, and we're just keep it fun, because I guess at our age, and I'm sure you're the same way, is if it's not fun and it's work, then why am I doing it? Like, yeah, I have to go somewhere 40 hours a week to work. I don't want my fun nighttime stuff to become that. So
exactly,
yeah, that's really looking forward to that. The first season, quote unquote, is sequels, because the show's a sequel and we're bringing it back.
Perfect.
So we have a couple movies lined up, but yeah, we're certainly going to have you on that.
Anytime. I would love to do that. Yeah. And I like the idea of the return of the pod. See, you're smart. You figured out I'm going to do this every week thing and got away from it. I have not done that yet. This is episode 234. I started this show 235 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, and bless you, I was looking at your schedule and I'm like, holy shit, this guy does so much. But, I recognize burnout. I mean, there was a period of time up until recently, I had 2 jobs. I played in 2 bands. I helped run a wrestling company. And I had like a couple podcasts going too. So it's like, I have a problem with free time apparently. And I have a wife.
Yeah.
so it's like, you just, reprioritize a little bit. And that's kind of where we're at now.
And I mean, for me, I'm going to keep doing this show the way that I do it until it's no longer fun. And it becomes work, and it hasn't hit that point yet. It helps that I don't have, like, I live alone. I got my dog, but this is a lot of my free time is doing these shows. So I do right now. I've got 3 going, with a 4th one making its return for a final season. Cause we did start doing seasons for that. My other shows, I do this one every week because it's just me, and it's easy because I rotate guests in. So yeah, I don't have to force, like, if I had a every time co-host, I would not make them do it weekly, or I certainly would be like, look, if you need a week off, that's fine. You need a couple weeks off, whatever it is. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. It should be fun. You should do these things because you enjoy them. I am of the mindset that, like, work is terrible and do as little of it as possible, but do the things that fulfill you and make you feel good. If it's being in a band, if it's making movies, if it's doing stop motion animation, if it's whatever it is, do those things. Mine happens to be taking all of my free time and watching whatever random movie I'm told to watch that week. So,
which and God bless my wife, I love her dearly, but I kind of miss that part of that point in my life where it's like, oh, I can play video games and watch 4 movies in a night because I can do whatever I want. She travels for work, so there's a lot of times when, like, she's gone for a week and I just line up movies and stuff to catch up on, and it's awesome. But yeah, so I completely understand that, and a little jealous of you.
It has its advantages and its disadvantages, but thank you so much for being here. This was fun. Definitely going to do this again. You're welcome back anytime. We'll
please
find something else you haven't seen, or maybe you'll make me watch Wolf Cop. Who knows?
You know what? I was just gonna say, like, there's a list of like those movies that everyone's like, you should see that I haven't, and I understand that, but you just signed yourself up to watch Wolf Cop. We're doing that.
Hey, you know what? It can't be the worst thing I've ever seen. So I'm all for it.
It's genuinely enjoyable to me.
Well, that's good. That face told me a lot, though. But
Well, I
definitely
was trying to think through, but
check out when it comes back, Return to the Podcast of Terror, because that's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait to get Corey back on here too. But we'll get you back on here. This is dog just sat on my foot. This has been a lot of fun. I record this show live on Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time at twitch.tv/TV's Travis. And then it comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, any podcatcher or YouTube. You can go there, youtube.com/@TV's Travis. If you could head over there and do a subscription to the channel, that helps boost the channel and make those visible to other people as well. It's a great sort of version of word of mouth, or letting people know about the show. There's also a Patreon, patreon.com/WYHS. For as little as $1 an episode, you can help support the show that way if that works for you. There's merchandise you can find at tvstravis.com. You can find the links for the merchandise, Patreon, all that kind of stuff there. All the shows that I do are there as well, back catalogs and everything. Patrons do get special access on the Discord, as well as monthly movie catch-up nights. I go through the back catalog of 200 plus episodes that I've done. We discuss it. We pick a movie to watch. Last month was August. It was Nick Cage month, so we went back and we watched Vampire's Kiss, which was so much fun. I don't know what we're doing this month yet. We're working on figuring out what movie it's going to be, but those are fun once a month. I've got some more video content coming soon. Patrons will get to see that first, so definitely something to check out. But tvstravis.com and wait you haven't seen anywhere you get your podcasts. Matt, thank you so much for being here. This was loads and loads of fun, and I can't wait to do it again.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And as we like to always say every week, enjoy your movies, and let's be excellent to each other. This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.
Well, it's going to take a hell of a lot more than a lame prank like this to get Curtis Mooney to throw in his badge, so fuck you. Over.